Hi, this is Glenn Kendall with Concourse Hosting, and today I'm going to be building a dashboard in Tableau using data from the Razor's Edge, and I'm going to call it the Proposal Pipeline Dashboard. So tools I'm going to be using to do this, Tableau Desktop 10.4, and I'll be connecting directly to SQL Server that's running on my workstation here, and connecting to a Razor's Edge database. For those of you that are hosted with Blackbaud, or you're in a situation where you don't have direct access to your data, what you want to do is get a copy of your database. You can request that from Blackbaud, just ask them for a backup of your database, and then you can go ahead and restore it on a local workstation. This also works if you have Razor's Edge NXT. The backend database is the same whether you have Razor's Edge 7 or Razor's Edge NXT. Before I jump into the webinar itself, just a quick plug about Concourse and our services. So what we do is we host Blackbaud software, CRM, BBIS, Razor's Edge, Financial Edge, really any software that can be hosted on-premise, we can host as well. We also do data warehouse hosting. That would be a good situation for those of you who are hosted by Blackbaud but still want to do some of the kinds of things that we're doing here. And we also do Tableau server hosting and then consulting, building Tableau dashboards and custom data sources and that sort of thing. Today specifically, I'm going to be looking at proposals. So this is the proposals tab, or the prospect tab, if you will, in Razor's Edge. So if you have the prospect tab, and you're using proposals to track your major gifts. Specifically, we're going to be looking at asked and expected amounts, and also looking at an indicator of kind of what's coming next in the pipeline, and show your way, kind of a cool way to do that, to have an interactive indicator. And then we're going to also be showing how to display things over time and basically take all this and put it together and mash it up into a dashboard. All right, so this is SQL Server Management Studio. So I just want to pop in here real quick and show you the database I'm connecting to. So this is, Razor's Edge, and here are the tables. As you can see, there's a number of tables in there. Specifically, we're looking at the proposal table, and then these are the columns that are in there. If you have another kind of fundraising CRM, like Blackbaud CRM or Lucian, you can do these same kinds of things. Really, it's not the product, because we're not using the product itself, right? We're just connecting to the back-end data. So whether it's connecting directly to a database that is the database the vendor, connects to and uses, or you're exporting the data out, it really doesn't matter. Just the same concepts apply. But I just wanted to show you, kind of what's happening here as far as what we're going to be connecting to. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that and then fire up Tableau. I have both Tableau 10.4 and 10.5 on here. Tableau 10.5 has some new features with hyper, faster data extract. So we're still playing around with between those two versions. So once you open up Tableau, basically you get this, this dashboard, and it wants to connect to data so you can get going. So you can connect to Tableau server or Excel or whatever. Of course, we're going to connect to Microsoft SQL Server. That's the name of my server, the database I'm going to connect to, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the password here. All right. Once I have entered the password, I told it to connect to Razor's Edge, but you can see the other databases that are available to me. Depends on your credentials and what user you're connecting with. But here's all the tables I was talking about. I already know I'm after the proposal table, so rather than scrolling, because I'm very lazy, I'm going to go after this proposal table here, so I can just start to type the word proposal, and it shows me just the ones that have proposal in the name. So if I double click on that, immediately adds all the fields that are in there. It does it, in a grid or in a list, depending on how you want to view it. And I can go over to this sheet, click on sheet 1, and there's all my data. Now, it could be that you want to connect other bits of data in here. For example, you may want to connect the prospect database, the prospect table. So if you were to double click on that table, you could see there's a join that pops up here. Then it's basically asking you, hey, what do you want to join on? Is there an ID, for example? Prospect ID would be ID in this other table. It tries to figure it out, Tableau does, to, what's the most logical thing to join on. And then that, of course, would let you get at other data fields. And then you can join this to something else, say constituent table, and on and on and on. So there's a lot of what you can do, mixing and matching tables. But I'm not going to do that now. I just want to show you that's possible. I'm going to go ahead and pop back out and just do the proposal table. And we'll just have fun with this one and see what we can do. So within Tableau, immediately it divides things up into 2 categories: dimensions, which are typically these blue pills, and measures, which are typically green pills. Dimensions are categories of things, slices of the data. It can be this or that or the other. Measures are things that you're adding, you're counting, you're summing up numbers typically, right? So in dimensions, could be things like the date, or maybe fund categories, names of things. And then measures, in this case, are, the amounts. And then there might be, some other numeric fields that aren't really measures, things like, a status or a gift type, even though they may be represented as a numeric value here. So sometimes you'll have to, tell Tableau, hey, this isn't really, a measure, convert it to a dimension instead. But just know that Tableau basically does its best to try to figure out just by looking at it, looking at your data. Is this a string? Is it a number? Is it a dimension? Is it a measure? All right. So the first thing that I'm going to do is look at the amount asked and also the amount expected. So if I just double click on these, Tableau will immediately add them to the viz. I'm going to arrange it a little bit differently than what Tableau is doing. I'm going to put them both up here on the columns. And then I'm going to take the proposal name, which is a dimension, and put that on rows. And immediately you can see what it's doing. It's basically saying, hey, here's all the proposals that I have in my system. And it's showing the amounts as bar graphs. Although this is the proposals that I have in my system from all time, I probably want to filter this out. So one thing I can do to do a filter is either filter by the date added or maybe the date asked. I'll go ahead and do date asked because we're really just interested in, say, proposals for this year, for this fiscal year. You can do a range of dates or a relative date. I'll just go years and just say, yeah, just basically anything this year. When you do this, it's going to assume it's a calendar year. You can always tell Tableau fiscal year by clicking on the pill itself and then going to default properties, and you can say the fiscal year starts at a certain time, say July, or whenever your fiscal year starts, and then Tableau will adjust what a year means appropriately. Okay, so this just gives me, some real basic information. Here's the total amount asked across these proposals and the total amount expected. I want to add a little more visual interest to this, so I'm going to add some color to it. And what I'm going to do is just drag this pill down to the colors. But when I do that, I'm going to hold down the control button, because if I drag it without holding down the control button, it'll move it, and I just want to make a copy instead. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that down. And so it adds color to both of them. But for the second one, I want it to be a different, I want to color it differently, I guess, based on, this one's the amount expected. And so this bar graph in the marks card here is for amount expected. And then when I go up to this one, here's the amount asked. This is amount asked. So I just want to change the colors here so that visually we can tell these are different things. We'll leave amount asked as blue, and we'll make amount expected as green. So that's going to be money coming in the door. All right. And another thing just to note up here, when I double clicked on these values, it created a sum automatically. So it's adding them up, right? It's trying to calculate what's the total amount for each of these. And then it breaks it down into these different categories, the proposal names. Okay. I'm going to add a little more detail, again, by holding down the control button on my keyboard. And now I'm going to drag that same pill up to the label. I'm going to do that on each of these sections of the marks card. And I forgot to hold down the control button there, so I moved it. If you don't hold down the control button, it moves it. Try it again, hold down the control button and drag it up there. And now it makes a copy of it. So now I've got these two things, both color and a label on the marks card. Going to tweak this a little bit further. I just want to show these as a currency. If I choose standard currency, you'll just basically put a $ in front of it and then pennies at the end. I don't care about pennies because we're talking about big gifts here. If it's a proposal, it's going to be big gifts. So instead of doing that, I'm going to do a custom currency amount, no decimal places, and let's do it in thousands. I'll do that for both values here. Default properties, number format, currency custom, and then thousands of units. Okay. Now that I have a label next to the bar graph itself, I don't really need the label in the axes, so I can hide that. But before I do that, I'm going to flip the axis. I'll show you what I mean by that. So to flip the axis, what you do is you select the axis and then you right-click on it. And you get this option that says Edit Axis. And go ahead and click on Reversed, and that'll flip the axis around. I think this is just kind of, a more fun way to look at it. It's just a little bit different. No other reason than that. It just looks more symmetrical to me to do it this way. Plus, over time, you can kind of see, hopefully the money will move out of the asked and become bigger and bigger on the amount expected. So for me, it's easier to see that kind of movement by looking at it this way. I'm going to hide this by, again, right-clicking on it and deselecting Show Header, and then that makes that value go away there. I'm going to increase the font size here. Just right-click on it, go to Format. I'll do a 12-point font just to make it a little easier to read. And expand this out so that we have all of our proposals in there. It's not being clipped. And then I'm going to just increase the spacing just a hair. Just give it a little bit more real estate here so I can see things. Okay. Great. So this is going to be the first aspect or the first element of our dashboard. I'm just going to rename this bar graph just so I can kind of keep track of things. And that's pretty much it for this guy. The next thing I'm going to do is now create an indicator of showing which gifts, or which proposals rather, they're not gifts yet, which proposals are expected to be funded in a certain period of time. So which ones, and I want to show some kind of indicator to say, hey, these are the ones that we're expecting soon in a certain period of time. So I can, down here in Tableau, click on New Worksheet and then start building that out if I want to. Or I can say, you know what, I'm kind of lazy and I just made a bunch of stuff here that I want to keep some of it. So instead, I'm going to duplicate this. So by duplicating, I make a second copy. It's exactly the same, thus the word duplicate. And I'm just going to rename this guy indicator. So with the duplication, I keep the formatting and I keep the filters. I mean, those are the main things. Yeah, I could recreate those again, but just kind of a cool little trick to get you moving a little faster doing things in Tableau. All right, so I'm going to keep the proposal name, but I'm going to get rid of these other values. And in their place, I'm going to make a calculated field. Now, to make a calculated field in Tableau, don't be intimidated. It's pretty easy. To find the menu item for it, you can get it at it a couple ways, but I like to click on this little arrow up here next to dimensions. That'll say create calculated field, and then I'll name it something. I'll just call this expected. Now, this particular calculated field is going to be a true-false value. True if it's expected, false if it's not. So I'll show you what I mean here. So I'm going to start out by saying if. This is going to be based on the date. So how far out the expected date is compared to now, where we are. So I'm going to do a calculation that's built in to Tableau called dateDiff. Right? It's going to take the difference in the dates. We have to say, what are you going to do the difference on? Months, days, weeks. There's going to be days. So this is just a certain parameter to put in there. The start date is going to be today. I could just start to type the word today, and Tableau will give me some options to autocomplete. And then I'm going to be comparing it to the date expected. So this is going to take the difference in between today and the date that a particular proposal is expected, and give me the number of days. I'm going to start out with just 60 days. I'm going to say, hey, if it's within 60 days, we expect that money. So if it is less than or equal to 60, we're going to say then true. So just simple programming, formatting here for Tableau. Else false end. And just like that, we made a calculated field. Cool. So it shows up in here alphabetically. Again, I can search, do this little search here. I want to narrow it down if you have a ton of different, data elements to search by. I'm going to put expected on color. Now, Tableau automatically turns them into boxes, which is fine, but I want my indicators to be circles, just because. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Okay. So you can see here, true and false. So the ones that are true, these are the proposals that we're expecting to get funded in the next 60 days. And then the other ones we're not. One thing we can do to make this a better indicator is because you basically just want to show the ones that are expected and you don't want to show the other ones. So otherwise the user looks at this and they have to think, what am I looking at? So to do that, we're going to edit the colors. And basically we're going to hide the false. So we do that by just double clicking on the color and assigning it the color white. And it hides it, makes it go away. And the color true will make green, just because green is the money coming in, right? And we'll go ahead and apply that. And just like that, now we have a nice little indicator. We can put a border around it as well, kind of make it pop out a little bit more. Or not, actually. We don't want to put a border around it because then you can see we have, you know, our trick is revealed. So, okay, so scratch the border. If you make a mistake on something and you want to undo it, you can just hit the back button here, and then you'll go back to where things were at. I could probably find a better way to do this. Instead of using the built-in things there, you can use shapes instead. Triangles, down triangles, you know, whatever, something like that. We'll do diamonds. So diamonds will be our indicators. Okay. Great, so that's our indicator now. So now we have a couple of elements and we can start to put together our dashboard. So let's go ahead and do that. This down here is for a new worksheet. If I want to create a dashboard, I click on this. What's a dashboard? It's a collection of worksheets, really. It has other properties where the worksheets can interact with each other as well. But you know, just to start out with here, you can just think of it as a collection of worksheets. So I'm just going to double click on these and Tableau will automatically add them. And it also adds the legends as well, which you probably don't want. I'm going to delete that. I'm also going to turn off my volume on the computer so it doesn't make that annoying noise. Okay. Now I've got the proposal name is in here twice, right? Because it's on both worksheets together. So to get around that, what I'm going to do is go to this other worksheet and just basically hide it. So now that's hidden and goes away. I'm also going to hide the titles and the labels. And you can also see the other reason that I did the copy, or the duplication rather, of the worksheets down here. By doing that, then the layout is the same, right? I had changed the size of the font. I had changed the spacing between the rows, and those are maintained because I duplicated it. So now, you know, stuff lines up here when I do this. Over here in the bar graph, I can try to do a little bit more formatting, maybe just clean it up a bit to get rid of some of these, this banding that's happening here. Okay. So by getting rid of the grid lines, now it's just a little bit cleaner looking. You might have to play with the spacing just a hair, but you know, that's pretty close, so I'm not going to really worry about it right now. Now we know that this is the amount expected, and the amount, or sorry, asked is in blue. So this is the amount asked, and the amount expected is in green. But if someone's coming to this dashboard for the first time, since we took out those labels on the bottom, they won't be able to know that, right? So what we need to do is have some kind of label or total that's describing that. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this guy again, just because I was talking up how awesome duplication is. So let me duplicate this sheet again. I'll rename it and call this one asked. I mean, there's really no benefit of doing the duplication here because I'm going to take basically everything out. The only thing that I'm keeping is the filter. So I could have easily just put the filter on there as well. What I'm going to do is put the amount asked over here. And I mean, that's pretty much it. I just want to make this a little bit bigger. Format it, maybe make it 22 font. Doesn't quite fit in the space I've provided it, so I need to make that a little bit bigger. Change the color as well. Let's see, asked I said is going to be blue. Go ahead and make that blue. And the same with my title. I'm going to go ahead and make that blue. 22 points. Maybe bold. Maybe center it. Okay. Now back to my dashboard. I'm going to go ahead and add that. And I'm going to move this element so it's actually above here. And I'm going to duplicate this and do the same thing with expected. Rename this sheet, call this expected. And let's just change the values here. Put expected up there instead. Expected is green, being consistent. Make these green. So now you can see I have, just by putting asked over here and expected over here, you can just tell. It's like, hey, this is blue and this is above this. So this is all related to asked and this is related to expected. I could probably do a better job on the formatting here. I can tell it to fit the width. I have done weird formatting here because I have one center aligned and one left aligned. I'm pretty sure this alignment is left aligned. Automatic. Maybe I'll just change it to left. And then let's try this again. You can tell it to fit the width. Well, it's just going to stay left aligned there. Yeah, you can just play with the formatting and see what works best there. But to be consistent, I'm just going to go ahead and make both of these left aligned. Cool. Okay. Probably to be consistent, I should make this one right aligned, right? Because it's doing the mirror image thing. I'm not going to worry about it right now, though. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to put a title up here for my dashboard. I'll call it Proposal Pipeline 2018. I will make this one centered and 22 point because why not? So really now it's kind of a formatting exercise where by lining these elements all up the same, these two now line up the same. So we're happy with the layout as far as those things go. However, one thing I can guarantee you, as soon as you publish something like this to your boss, he's going to say, okay, well, what does this mean here? This expected is true. And you say, well, that's, you know, whatever's expected in 60 days. And then the response back will probably be, well, what if I want to see 30 days or 90 days? Be like, oh, I have to make another graphic. I have to make another dashboard for that. Actually, you don't. You don't. You can create an interactive element and let them choose the amount of time they want. So I'll show you how to do that. We're going to create a parameter, and we're going to call it days expected within. Change this to an integer. You could just leave it at that, or you could specify a range to say, hey, it can only be between 1 and 365 or 180 or whatever makes sense for your data. We'll just say 180 and a step size of 1. Now, once I create a parameter, I can say show parameter control. Now it shows up over here. And now all I have to do is go back to my calculated field, and then instead of doing the hard coding of 60 days that I did in here, I instead say, let's use the variable that we just created, this parameter, days expected within. And then all the marks go away because, as it turns out, there's nothing expected within 1 day. I have the parameter control set to slider, which means you have to slide it around to get it to change the values. You can also change it to type in, which I prefer, so then you can just type in 90 instead, and then the graph will, or the dashboard or worksheet will automatically update. You can also do some formatting here, maybe change the font size of that, just make it a teensy bit bigger. Yeah, something along those lines. Cool. That parameter control doesn't show up here automatically, so we have a couple of options on how to add it back in. If we click on the worksheet with which the parameter is associated with, it now shows up over here, and we can select it, and now it'll be available to move around and use on the dashboard. Or we just remove this worksheet and then re-add it, and the parameter will be in there. It's going to re-add the other stuff too, so we don't want to do that. I'm going to move it right over here. Change it back to type in instead of slider. Cool. All right, so now you have this interactive element here. Change this to 60. Change this to 30. And automatically things are updating, right? 15. So anything you can do like that to add a nice little bit of interactivity to your worksheet, to your dashboards, is going to go a long way. It's going to make it more interesting for the user. And I think just the way people's brains work, it'll be, you know, the information will sink in better, shall we say, when you know, when you get to play with it and look and see how things change. Okay. I mean, it's a pretty good dashboard right here. We could leave it at this, and this would be perfectly fine. You know, it depends on how many proposals you have. If you have pages of proposals, there could be some scrolling involved for the end users. So you could also add other filters in here to say, show just proposals within a certain date range, or maybe proposals associated with a certain solicitor. So that way, you can still keep, not have data overload, if you will, by having too much information in there. So play with that. One more element that I did want to add is a time element. So I'm going to duplicate this guy again. Duplicate that. We'll call this one time. And I'm just going to rip everything out again, keeping the filter. Okay, so time, let's go ahead and do date asked as our time element. And I'm going to look at months. You notice here, just by clicking on these buttons, you can expand or collapse these pills. So it starts out as just year, and then it goes to quarter, month, day, go down to whatever level of detail you want. And then I can remove certain elements. I can remove the year if I want to. I mean, we already said it's 2018, so that's redundant to do. And probably redundant to do the quarters as well. Either do quarters or months, so we'll just do months. And then I'm going to do, again, amount asked and amount expected. Instead of just showing them as numbers, though, I want to do a nice bar graph again. I'm going to do a side-by-side bar. So when you hit this show me up here in the upper right, it will, give you all these different options of visualizations to represent the data. It depends on what you have added. So certain things won't show up. So, but based on the data we have, we can do a side-by-side chart, and there it is. So cool, it does it automatically for us. Really, then all I need to do is change the colors back to our color convention we were using, which was blue for the one and green for the other. So I did that. I mean, that's really it. Maybe another thing I'd want to do is actually add some lines in this one. I think I'd want to add column divider, something like that. Maybe not so dark. Somewhere in there. I'm going to hide the headers because we've already determined that asked is blue and green is expected, right? So we don't need to show that again. I'm going to hide this as well because it seems evident that it's date that we're talking about up here. Yeah, let's go ahead and add this time element. And then format it so that it fits well within our real estate that we've given it. Let's hide the title. Things take up a surprising amount of space. Maybe move this down a hair. We don't want you. Let's get rid of that. And then move this down to match. All right, let's try some different dates in here. Go back to 60. Okay. So yeah, this is an example of how you can make a dashboard for a proposal pipeline. Obviously, we can do some more formatting here and kind of clean things up a bit, but this is just a quick way to be able to show some key elements, add some interactivity, and just think about different ways that you can represent your data. A lot of times you need to start out with a question as far as what are we trying to answer here with this, rather than just throw a bunch of numbers out. Think about what is the question that you want answered, and also who the audience is. So this dashboard may vary depending on who it's for. So this might be more suited for executives, where they just want to get the overall numbers, know what's coming next, and have a little bit of interactivity so they can see, oh, okay, if I put in 15 here, I can see this one's coming immediately, and then 30, then we're going to get these other two. You could even do further color coding where you could have different time segments were different colors, yeah, things like that. But really the point I was trying to make there is that you want to make sure that the dashboard and the look and feel that you're going for is going to match the audience. So this is really suited more for executives. If you wanted to do something that has more depth and it would be more of an analytical thing, you could add more filters to it and more interactivity to say, okay, let's look at this for last year, or do a comparison last year versus this year, and do just basically be able to have more data points to do more of an in-depth analysis, or at least let the end user interact with it a little bit more. So try to keep the amount of colors that you're using to a minimum so it's not too confusing, and make it as intuitive as possible, really. So yeah, that's all I prepared for you today. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon at another webinar. Thanks a lot.